All right, welcome back. It is another episode of Meet the Scene, slightly delayed. I think this is episode 7 now, if I'm not mistaken. We do have the legend himself. Oh shit, no, that's this next week. So yeah, unfortunately we've got Gumpster this week. So you'll have to make do. Just starting out of it from the start.
It flamed already.
That lasted
you said
long,
you wouldn't
yeah.
flame me.
I had to do it, man. But yeah, I do apologise for the lack of Meet the Scene episodes. It is just insanely difficult to try and get people's schedules in, especially when these go on for like an hour or two. It's just
That and broken mics.
Yeah, broken mics and just shit quality for myself near enough everything. This is pretty much going to be like a free balling episode a little bit, I guess, just because of, as Gumpster is near enough as old as the Queen, I think it's just easier for Gump to go on storytelling mode more than anything.
Whoa, hang on a minute. I'm not 92. Come on.
I mean, you could have fooled me, Gum. You could have fooled me. But yeah, anyway, thank you very much for obviously coming on. Like, one of the big reasons why I wanted to get someone like yourself on is because of you have been around since Vietnam near enough in terms of the beginning of the scene from like 1.6 era all the way through it. You've been involved in various things, whether it be leagues, tournaments, the running of LANs, which we now have with Epic. You've been involved in various like teams and organizations with Mod and Perilous as well. So you've got a vast amount of experience, so your opinions will be very, very interesting to hear on certain bits. So let's try and kind of kick the ball off in terms of the beginning for you. Like, what was it initially that got you into the world of gaming initially, and then like how did that grow into esports?
My camera's decided to die. I don't know what's going on. Yeah, so basically, whilst I try and sort out my camera, and it doesn't slide off like that stupid thing.
UK
anyway,
production values, let's go.
UK production values, my ass, basically. Yeah, so basically, I started off when my friends at school decided that they would start playing games. So they were playing Medal of Honor and at the time, and decided that they would want me to come and try out Counter-Strike. So I basically begged my parents to get a brand new PC because they had a PC that was one from TFI, you know, that show that was on like Fridays with Chris Evans on a Friday chat portion.
Vaguely, yes.
Yeah, that mum and dad won a PC back then, which was top of the range, and I was playing like shitty games on that. And then basically, after that, you know, my friends were pressurizing me. Oh, you should come and play Counter-Strike with us. You should come and play Counter-Strike with us. So eventually, I begged my parents, and they got me a new PC. And then I started playing Counter-Strike 1.6.
Nice.
So we were in a clan called Frag. No. Oh, fuck it. Jesus, this is a long time ago. Lag something or other.
It's all right, Gum, like the dementia.
Yeah, exactly. It's yeah, I've got dementia, so it's all right. So yeah, we basically started playing games together, and I got involved there with 1.6 back in December 2003.
That's rolling back the years, isn't it?
It is rolling back the years. And of course, the following year, Counter-Strike Source came out.
Woo!
So everyone was making the switch, and I was like, well, I don't really want to make the switch. I love Counter-Strike 1.6. It's a great game. And then thought, well, you know, these UK2.net servers on 1.6, playing a bit of CS Italy by myself was probably not the best of ideas. So I eventually got on the hype train and got onto Counter-Strike Source, even though it was a diabolical game at the start.
It's interesting that you say that, because I mean, like, one of the things that we said before that I wanted to talk about a bit was like the CGS era and everything. But even when CGS came out, there was still the kind of big euphoria that kind of 1.6 wasn't the chosen game because of the amount of hate kind of directed towards like Source at that point when it first came out, because the 1.6 community was still alive and kicking quite a lot, right?
Yeah.
So it was interesting, kind of a lot of people didn't like that transition to Source. I know a lot of people quit originally from 1.6 just because they really didn't like Source that much when it first came out. So it's kind of interesting to see how that developed. But yeah, you, as like a lot, jumped on the bandwagon, eventually moving over to Source. So then what continued from that point onwards?
Well, after that, I obviously got involved with a clan, and my friends did, with their Medal of Honor clan, who wanted to play some Counter-Strike Source, and we became 5th Battalion. So
I love
yeah,
old school clan names, man. If I
I
like,
know.
if I look
So
all the ones that I was in the back, they were just so much better. Whereas now it's just those one brandable names that you get for organizations. Like,
exactly, and Fifth Battalion sort of made a step forward into Counter Strike Source, and you know we all played regularly. We played various different leagues at the time. The SGL was one of them, and there was some other. Clan Base was another one that we played in as well.
yeah, I remember clan
So
base.
So eventually, my friends decided they would stop playing, but we did go to some LANs. Well, I say some LANs. We didn't really go to a LAN for Counter Strike Source. Basically, I went to a game on LAN in the August of 2005, I think.
Yeah.
It was in London. It was at the Excel Centre, and it was for Call of Duty United Offensive.
Mate,
And
don't even get me started on that game. You're going to trigger me a little bit. Like, I was such a COD 1 vet that when UO came out, it was kind of like, because it was tanks and everything in it at first, and as much as like I'd played Medal of Honor and other games, but UO was just like, no, it was fun to play, but it wasn't from a competitive standpoint. It just wasn't the one, like, at all.
no,
But continue.
no,
Anyway,
but it was
sorry.
the only time I've ever touched COD back then,
Sure.
right? So we went to this LAN. It was a turn up and play LAN, obviously. So it was a 1 day thing. We turned up. There was 8 teams there with us, or there was us and 7 other teams, and we basically we got our asses handed to us. But we did play well. And we could safely say that we were one of the top 8 teams in the UK at that point in time, because there was not much
I
of a
was going
scene.
to say 8
So,
out of 8 teams. Yeah,
yeah,
sure, bro.
exactly. So yeah, I really enjoyed that side of it, and that's what really got me in sort of wanting to go to LANs and stuff, because it was enjoyable, you know, going and playing games with other people.
I think especially at that like time, right? Especially now because of the how much it's advanced in a business perspective, then the kind of back in the day everyone naturally only went to go and enjoy themselves, more so now where it's completely different mindset and it's to go to win, go to win the money, you know what I mean? That's what incentivizes a lot of people because of how big esports has grown these days, right?
Yeah, exactly. So back then you used to go for fun, really.
Sorry, what? I don't understand. What do you mean?
I know, right? Goes for fun these days.
I know,
God.
right? Yeah.
So I ended up going to that LAN, and then after that, sort of my friends sort of quit playing Counter Strike Source, so I had to find somewhere else to go. So I started playing on a load of community servers. Ended up finding a guy called Rust, who was playing with a clan tag called SAR, and
Dude.
yeah, well, there's a story behind the name. So he was like, "Oh, you're a really good player." Yeah, right.
Sorry, someone actually said that to
Yeah,
you.
yeah.
I've seen you play CS and Overwatch, but I don't.
Yeah. So he was like,
Fucking
"Oh
hell.
yeah, you're a really good player. Why don't you come and join SAR?" And I was like, "Oh yeah." So got involved with SAR. Found out that it was called Sexy and Ruthless at the time. So I was like, "Oh well, you know, whatever." And eventually it came about that it was actually called Secure Retaliate. And it was a sort of big community of people. There was 20 to 30 people. And we were all playing nightly in different places. Total Warfare League was one of them. Clan Base was another. The SGL another. Pretty much. So we were doing sort of the rounds at that point.
Sure.
Hadn't even touched enemy down at that point, so you know it was quite fun. Then eventually we did touch enemy down, and that's where our special relationship with Ministry of Darkness came about, because obviously Mod was doing the Pro HL League at the time in Counter Strike Source, and I got talking with Sans, and then I got talking with a few other people in the community for Mod, and eventually we struck up a deal to sort of combine SAR and what they called Mod Extreme at the time, and that's eventually where my sort of heart sort of lied, was with Ministry of Darkness. And
I was gonna say nice positive name Mod for the actual the acronym.
Yeah.
Of it.
Ministry of Darkness.
Nice positive. But one thing I actually do want to touch on, because you mentioned it then, was like for me when I was playing COD 2 and COD 1 especially, like clan based and enemy down were like the two big tournaments that kind of, or big online league sort of things that facilitated that. And clan base, as much, I mean, clan base was great. It had a lot of issues as well, but I think clan base eventually like went down because they owed shit tons of money to near enough everyone. They just didn't pay out so much money. Enemy Down, I just don't think they had the finances themselves to really keep it up with what was required. But Enemy Down was a great league. I know for CS as well, especially, like for COD it probably wasn't the biggest thing, but it was like for CS, then a lot of people now you still hear them talking about how much they miss the way that Enemy Down was run for CS.
Yeah, I do as well. I mean, Enemy Down was a big part of the scene back then. You know, you'd go to every series back then, and Enemy Down was always on everyone's screens because that's where people congregated the most. You know,
Sure.
you would have 300 UK teams in the ED Open ladder, and everyone would be on the ED forums flaming everyone else, and EDCSSL would come around and people would still flame. Seedings would be hilariously bad. You know, all these bullshit. Yeah, all these bullshit excuses that everyone came out with. Oh, the seedings are shit, the bias, you know, your bias towards someone else. You know, it was all part and parcel of what Enemy Down was about, and there was no greater thing that Enemy Down was. And back then, it was just the best place to be in the UK, and no one has that these days, unfortunately. So we'll probably touch on that later on.
Indeed, but yeah, get back into MOD. I mean, that's where I know you like came across the likes of like Ash, Eddie, James Star, people like that are kind of still involved in the scene. But that
obviously,
was later days, as far as I'm aware.
Yeah, that was later days. So obviously, I started out with ModX, and we were sort of a big sort of team. We had about 10 or 11 players. We were planning to go to Insomnia 30, but ended up not, and I ended up going to I-30 anyway with some of the other mod guys that were there. So we had the main team of Ministry of Darkness, which included Boosty, Thunder, and some of the other big names in that team. And they went to I-30, and I ended up coming to I-30 with them. And that's where, I mean, before that I was planning to go to I-28,
sure.
But ended up going to Stratland Christmas, which was kind of a different mentality, very casual. A lot of beer was drunk over that weekend because Wizzo decided that he would, you know, it was a free bar all weekend essentially.
Back in the day when Wizzo actually got involved in the events, yeah.
Exactly, and it was a cracking weekend. And then obviously I-30 rolled around, and I can only, there was one big memory from I-30, apart from all the ED coverage at the time with the eBuyer competition, and Auxilla and sort of Z-Board and teams like that. There is one particular crap memory from that LAN where I slept at my desk all weekend, and that's how I rolled at LANs back then. And I woke up one night with just pizza boxes stacked as high as the fucking Empire State Building on my head.
Is that what started the whole like Gumpster getting terrorized at LAN? Like ever since that point, it's just become an every LAN scenario.
It is, yeah. Every single LAN, there would be something different that would happen to me. Yeah. So yeah, I-30, that was the biggest memory I have from it, really. But I remember going to I-30 and I got chased down by someone whilst I was walking down from the train station to Newbury Racecourse. I got chased down by someone. They were like, oh my God, you're Gumpster, aren't you? You're Gumpster. And I was like, I'm not even known these days. You know, at this point, I'm not even known. I mean, I'm not really known now, but you know, at this point, I was like, what the hell? And it was this guy who's from Team Carrick back in the day, and he's called Sawyer. He was like, oh my God, you're from Mod X, aren't you? And I was like, yeah. He's like, oh my God, we really love playing against Mod X in Enemy Down. I was like, what the fuck? And it was just one of those things which it just said things about LAN in general. Is everyone could just go to everyone and have a great time playing some games, getting to know people you played against online in, you know, some shit league. You know, that's the thing that really attracted me to LAN. So I ended up going with Mod X in I-31, and there is some terrible photos of the t-shirts.
I think I might have seen these ones. If I can find it, I'll put a picture up on the actual video.
Should be on my
Facebook.
I can find
it,
yeah, they should be on my Facebook. But there's some terrible photos of some really bad shorts from Gen Monkey and Sick at the time, and B, some of the shirts that I actually ended up designing 5 minutes before I left for LAN. Because we couldn't find anyone for a shirt or anyone to design shirts for us. So I went down to the local shop and said, I need some shirts designed for me. He was like, well, do you have the PDF? And I was like, what the fuck is a PDF? He goes, well, that's what I need to print this sort of exotic design from Ministry of Darkness on it. You know, if you want it embroidered, you need the PDF. I was like, I don't have time for this. So it's like 5 minutes later, I'm bloody, taking my hair out and designing these shirts, and I got flamed for it when I got to LAN, and like sort of gave them out to the boys, and we were just like, we can't wear these. These are awful, because these were like basic black t-shirts from Sainsbury's, and then there was some shitty print. I've still got some of the old t-shirt, basically. Yeah,
just bring it back. Gumpsters clothing line, like get it going.
Yeah, and, it probably cost me about £100 to get those shirts done. But it was well worth it for the memes. So yeah, those pictures are awful. But yeah, I-31 was a memorable LAN, just because the weather was really nice that weekend. So it was like a heat wave during I-31, and I can remember barbecuing with everyone. I can remember Gonzo back in the day, Mr. Richard Lewis, falling over tents because he was that drunk.
I've been told numerous Richard Lewis stories from attending I-Series events in a drunken manner quite a lot of the time. So yeah, I imagine that would be a scenario.
Yeah, if anyone remembered Cadred back in the day, Goody was Max Silver. Yeah. He was hilarious at LANs as well. So yeah, I-31 was like the first proper LAN for me with my team back at the time, and then the rest is really history. Mod grew obviously exponentially, and I met people like Anarchy and Renegade from back then, and we had like the Mod 5-star guys back then as well. And then eventually, after Thunder decided that he'd have a bit of a mental breakdown, which got exposed on Cadred, and Richard Lewis went after him, and the numerous stories tell themselves there. I eventually managed to become general manager of Ministry of Darkness, and then finally met the Rickroll Reflex boys, which was Ash, Eddie, Cloud, Raz, CC Raz back in the day. So I met those guys and picked them up for Ministry of Darkness, and then again the rest was history. We, took on players like J-Star and Emperor, and we had plenty of players going through the ranks at Ministry of Darkness, and that's how I saw Ministry of Darkness as ever. Anything to do with whatever I have involved myself in is all about progressing the talent line in general. So whether it's players or whether it's admins or casters, then it's all about progressing people to that point where they can make something out of their sort of careers if they wish in esports.
For sure. I mean, I think one thing that I will, and like this is going to be once in a blue moon, so make sure you savor it, or I'm actually going to compliment you. So get fucking ready. But you are one of those people that's very selfless in the way that you're always there to try and help someone else out near enough ahead of yourself quite a lot of the time. Like if you can see ways to kind of help someone progress or take time out of your own day in order to help someone else, you will actively do it. And there's not many people left in the scene that kind of will do that and take time out of their own day in order to help someone else. But then in that role of the general manager that you had with Mod, like what was kind of your day-to-day in that scenario? Because I guess from the outside and the way with me looking back at what Mod was, then it was still in that like half and half scenario between a clan community, like a community type clan, combined with them bringing in that competitiveness with those teams, with the quality of players like J-Star and the Ashes and people like that at the time.
Yeah, so Ministry of Darkness was there's a lot of stories to tell from Ministry of Darkness, from Sans's let's have a Flash website built, and let's put a golden deagle that can move around on the Flash website.
Flash websites were dope
because that's amazing. Back in the day, it was all about Flash.
It was.
Everything was Flash related, and that's what the Pro HL website was. I'm sure there is still a lot of stuff on Pro HL.
Yeah, I went on it earlier, and there was still some mod stuff on there.
Yeah, the history of mod as a whole is incredibly interesting. Like you've had players like Garpy, who was one of the best Quake players in the world, play for Ministry of Darkness for a long time. You know, before he moved to eventually Team Dignitas and other organizations. I don't know what he's doing these days, but you know, he was one of the best players. So Ministry of Darkness has always had that history, and I was just like, do you know what? That's a lot of history to take on board, and where do we go from here? And of course, I tried my absolute hardest to sort of conjure up a plan with Ministry of Darkness, but there was only so much I could do because I'm not a website developer.
Yeah.
I don't know much about coding websites. So that all fell to Sans back in the day, Mr. Sandman. He basically sort of coded the website and did a lot of things. And, you know, it was very difficult because at that time, his time was getting quite restricted with his work, and he finally met someone, and so it became very restricted, and there wasn't much communication towards the end of Ministry of Darkness, which is why I eventually sort of shut the whole thing down myself and moved on. But the day-to-day run-ins back then were quite simple. It was just making sure that all the teams could organize themselves, get into various different leagues. We had about 8 teams at one point. It was very difficult. There was different criteria for each of those teams. Some of them were very good, some of them were very shit, and some of them were just communities. Just a small pocket of the community that was left, playing a bit of Counter-Strike here and there, and other games. And eventually we tried reaching out and going into different games, but it wasn't working because ProHL's website was just not very
Optimized,
other game friendly. It wasn't
you...
other game friendly. It was mostly Counter-Strike or ProHL, Half-Life Deathmatch. There are still a lot of guides on that website somewhere. I'm sure Sans has still got them all. He's got a lot of guides of early Counter-Strike source sort of guides of of Aztec. There's a load of smoke strats for Aztec sitting around. Yeah, I know. It was just a case of making sure every team was happy and getting there. And it was very difficult finding that balance because, as you said, there's a lot of people who were different sort of criteria. There was a lot of people who were wanting to get that competitive edge, and there was others who didn't want that competitive edge. And it was so difficult to balance back then. So we had a lot of players come through the ranks, and eventually we came across Adam's team. We had an Icelandic team at the time before that, and who won an event in Iceland back then, which was their biggest event in Iceland. I can't remember what the name was, but there was some LAN that was quite big. But our Icelandic team were quite successful back then, and then eventually they folded. So I brought on Adam's team, which included Chicken Wing, and the famous Adam punches Chicken Wing at LAN incident happened at I
have been told about this. Did seem like quite an eventful event, shall we say?
Well, Chicken Wing was let's just put it this way: he was quite a character, and he did love his banter a bit too much, and he would say the most inappropriate things in a match.
Yeah.
And
from what I've been told, he didn't necessarily know where the line was, sort of thing.
Yeah, he dared Adam to come over and punch him, and so Adam stood up and literally went over in the middle of a match at I-42 and punched him in the face. What can you do about that? What can you do? I mean, I wasn't at the event to even spectate that because, I got there on, because Easter LANs are so difficult for me to get to these days because of retail and how our busy periods work. It means I can't go for Easter LANs because, you can't get Easter weekend off. So I wasn't there that weekend, but I did eventually go on the Easter Sunday or whatever it was. No, it was the Saturday night I went up. And the Saturday morning was when the incident happened. So I didn't quite see it all. And I had to sort of deal with the sort of clear up of that.
You don't enjoy the fun. You don't get the fun part. You just have to deal with the shit of it.
Yeah, it was quite awkward, let's put it that way. And then obviously at that time, there was a lot of bullshit that was going on between Ash's team and Emperor's team. Yeah. It was just like the kids in a playground. It was just so difficult to deal with. um, because like no one really wanted to talk to each other, and no one could handle the banter as such. So you know that's the kind of bullshit you have to put up with as a manager those days.
I wouldn't say overall much has probably changed realistically, though, has it? That's the concerning
Really,
part.
because it's all the same, isn't it?
Exactly. But I mean, continuing from that, then, I mean, so what was? Can I remember you done a little interview with Jamester about this as well, a while back, which I did actually give a watch back, and fair play to Jamester, so shout out to him. But
Legend.
what was the kind of reasons that you then decided to leave mod and then move over to Perilous in the same sort of role?
Um, I think it was lack of support, basically.
Did you have like more authority then, essentially, when you moved over to Perilous in terms of the amount of
No,
control that you had over things?
it was
Or?
never about authority. It was just the fact that there was a lack of support, that we were just kicking a dead horse at this point with Ministry of Darkness. You know, we had no strategy going forward,
Sure.
and there was no redundancy in the website to even get someone to code the website to what we needed it to be. And eventually I just decided, you know, enough was enough. I had a sit-down talk at I-49 with Mick and Vu at the time, and you know they tried a year before that at I-46 to get me on board, and said to me, "Oh, you really should come on board with Perilous, and you really should do this because mod's not going anywhere." Blah blah blah. That was basically what they were saying, and eventually I-49, you know, the thing had collapsed fully to the point where it was just Ash's team. There was just me overseeing Ash's team, and there was no support there to sort of go forward. Sans was hardly about. I think he was probably on one night a week at that point. You know, he wasn't around to sort of speak to and actually get things sorted. And, you know, I'm not going to kick anyone underneath a bus, but
Come on,
there wasn't.
Gumpster, that's the whole point of the show.
There wasn't any support network for me to even move forward. I had a plan. I wanted to move into other games, but having the time to move into other games is just difficult because I don't have all the time in the world to give. You know, whatever time I do have is quite precious. So at I-49, me, Mick, and Vu sat down in a quiet room, and we just, over a few beers, you know, like Mick does, and we just spoke about, you know, Perilous and mod and what was the sort of ambitions there with Perilous, and that's what led me to Perilous. And I didn't really do much. In all fairness to Mick, I sort of outlined, you know, my problems with everything. So I said, you know, I don't have much time to give. Whatever time you're going to get from me is what time I can give, you know, for just Perilous. And eventually sort of rode it out, and you know, I did things, but not a lot of things. So Perilous isn't one of the things that I sort of hold close to myself anymore, because
I guess especially in the way, I mean, not to... It probably didn't end in the best way of things either, I'm assuming, but I guess that comes at a bit of a later date in the conversation where we can kind of potentially get into that one a little bit. But
yeah, I mean, I'm gonna just say it quite clearly here. Like, Mick is a great friend. You know, at the end of the day, he would do anything for anyone. I think, you know, there's a lot of his past right now that he's not proud of at the moment, and obviously I'm not going to go into all of that, but there was a lot of difficulties in his own life that he was going through. But at the end of the day, like, Perilous is Perilous, and I was always attracted to Speedy G because he's such a madman, basically the bloody jiggly head. But yeah, every LAN we went to, it was great fun with the Perilous lot. Like, you know, every LAN we had great fun. And Perilous was a brilliant place to be, and still is these days. Like, even headed up by Brian, it's great, you know, organization to be with. The problem is there are problems. There are a few problems elsewhere, and you know, once those problems come to sort of light,
Gets
the social
difficult to get
media
over.
savvy
Yeah.
world that we have, it takes a long time for it to ever go back to the way it was, and that's where the difficulties lie right now with Perilous. So the conversation was quite open. It was honest. It was, we want to do this with Perilous. We want to do that with Perilous. We've got this already. We have a good League of Legends team at the time. We want to see ourselves in the next few years getting bigger and better. We want to finally start paying salaries, and that was what the talks were about. And at the time, there was a possibility for that. I think I helped Mick look at the sponsorship options quite a bit. But the unfortunate thing is we never sort of finished it, and therefore the sponsors sort of didn't come running to Perilous, and that was really the big problem there.
Yeah, I think even from I've always viewed Perilous in a very weird way. Like I like Mick, very very nice guy. Always give props to that. Obviously Brian there now as well, like very determined guy. Also a really really nice guy. Like literally one of the nicest guys. You can have a chat with him about anything.
Yeah,
Um, but as an org, I've always just been a bit baffled in many ways, just because if you look at say like even achievement wise, and they have got some genuinely decent achievements across the years that they've been active, right, in terms of like high land placements and things like that, and some of the players and teams that they've had represent them, etc. But they've never really seemed to get move on to the next level sort of thing. It seems like they've always been stuck in that same sort of infrastructure that they've got. They've never really grown past it. And I think, I mean, I've had conversations with like them in the past as well in terms of like what they were doing at the time, what they were looking at doing, and it's always been like there's always potentials with them sort of thing. So it's like, oh, we're just waiting on this. Like we hopefully will have this sponsor lined up, then hopefully we'll have that, but it just never seems to come through. So it's like what would you necessarily put that down to in those scenarios? Is it just like a lack of kind of commitment in seeing things through? Is it just say like the time consumption and people don't necessarily
it's
have the time to put into to getting it
I
done
don't
sort of
think
thing?
it's the lack of commitment. I think, everyone wants the best for whatever they're doing. You can say that more than anyone with UFrag. You know,
Rip.
yeah, you sit there and you look at it and you think, right, well, where do we go from here? And
Yeah.
this is the plan. This is what teams we've got. This is where they're placing at each LAN, and it's them planning how to approach sponsors and put it into an average Joe kind of speak. Because if you're approaching the sponsors who don't know esports, and at the time that esports wasn't that big
Yeah.
yet, then they're not going to know the gobbledygook about land placements. They're not going to understand land placements. So you needed a way of sort of attracting them to your package. And unfortunately, Mick didn't have the time. Vu stepped aside for a bit because he found, he was in problems in his own life and he wanted to get them sorted, and so he took time out. And then Mick's sort of time got really sort of well, it was mostly work commitments
Yeah.
basically. And unfortunately, when you're juggling and real life commitments to what you're doing as a hobby, your hobby takes a step back,
Yeah,
really,
no, it
essentially.
has to. Like, I mean, that you've probably done the same thing. God knows how many times the work takes the priority. I've had the exact same thing in the past as well, and it's just like for me, I'd say it's probably slightly difficult. Like, I still look back at say like even you, Frank, times, and I know I probably was putting in about 20% of the effort I actually needed to do in order to take it to the next level, and that's on me, right? Because at the end of the day, if I don't have that underlying passion to get that extra work ethic in there, then realistically it's probably something I shouldn't be doing. But then you
Yeah,
look at say like the typical Richard Lewis video scenario when he went on the rant about the UK teams and UK orgs specifically, right? And he's saying in terms of there's a lot of really really nice people out there and people that genuinely want to do well and genuinely want to help the scene, but realistically they just don't have the knowledge and the know-how to really take it to the next level and make that progression and things like that, and or don't necessarily have the experience in the business side of things to then make the difference from essentially running it from a clan community type organization to an actual professional organization, right? And I think that still applies to a lot of organizations that are still relevant in the UK today. Like there's still loads of them that are probably in that mindset, and it's difficult, right? It's if there was a written way that you're meant to do it and it's easy to do, then every bastard would be jumping on the bandwagon to do it.
Yeah,
um
exactly.
but yeah, no, for sure. I definitely, like, from the time consumption point of view, I know, like, Mick and even Brian, like Brian, I know puts a lot of time into kind of what he does with Perilous at the moment, and always has done since he's been involved in it. But it's very few and far between. You need more than one person that's able to put that sort of time commitments in it. You need a group of people that can actively all put in the same sort of work ethic into it. And without that, it's
Yeah,
very hard to actually make it work.
yeah, exactly. I mean, obviously we're going to maybe cover this in a little while around Epic as well, because there'll be a lot of conversation around that. But like, the biggest problem with that is it's very difficult to find that time work balance. If I come home from work after a long day, do I really want to be sitting there doing a sponsorship profile for my organization? Not really, because like I'm really tired. I'm really tired. I don't want to be doing more work on top of the work I've already done during the day. Okay, fair enough. I don't do manual labor as such, but it's still tiring in itself. The stresses and strains are definitely there with working in retail,
Yeah, no,
unfortunately.
like I mean, I've done it. I technically still do it now, because I mean, essentially, this is the like same comparison, that when I was working in London and still running Ufrag at the time, like I would literally be on a computer 9 to 5, 9 to 6, not get home from London till about 7ish, and then I'd end up having to then still sit on the computer for another 4 or 5 hours, and it was just draining. I just couldn't be asked of it. I wanted to get outside. I wanted to go do, what I mean? Because it was just, but at least with now the way that it is, and kind of back in that retail environment just for the time being sort of thing. But as much as shift work is absolute AIDS and everyone can agree to that, but at the same point it still gives you a bit more flexibility in the way that things work, and you're not just doing the same thing day in day out. You still get a bit of a varied experience with what happens day in day out. But
Yeah, exactly.
yeah, it's definitely very, very difficult to balance either way. Don't get it wrong, again, the same thing applies to everyone. You like still now UK players, you hear it from all the time in terms of it's so difficult for themselves to balance their schedules from whether it be work, education, personal lives, and then you've got the ever increasing amount of time you need to be putting into the game just to remain on a level, let alone improve and get better and compete at an even higher level.
Yeah.
So I think it's definitely something that's always been a bit of an issue. But that kind of leads me on to another point, actually, now we're kind of mentioning it. But I'd like to think that, say, like me and you are probably quite down to earth in this scenario, in terms of we're not the most egotistical people that exist. So I don't think
Talk
we've.
about yourself there.
I do
an
have
ego.
an ego sometimes. I'm not gonna lie, subconscious ego. Let's put it that way. But like, I think what I find slightly interesting though is that I don't like. We don't, from people that are managers and org owners and things like that, for the most part anyway, there seems to be a lot less like ego when it comes to thinking that they deserve a lot more sort of thing. They don't have this expectancy like things should just be given to them on a doorstep and just taking it in, whilst players, for me personally, a lot of them do seem to think that something's just meant to be gifted for them. Like, you still get the mentality of so many people and be like, oh, well, I'm not going to put the time in until someone decides to pay me to do it. Well, it doesn't fucking work that way, does it? In the same with any aspect of job that you want to get, you have to grind for it, show that you can do it, and then someone will give you the money to do it, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the problem is, digressing a bit, obviously, but
yeah, but it's the point. It's fine.
With regards to players, we saw a lot of this during the end of the Counter-Strike Source days. A lot of players back then had the sense of entitlement. They believed that it should be handed to them on the silver plate because they've proved themselves in the past in a previous game, and therefore they shouldn't have to work so hard for it because they've already made those achievements back then. But in all retrospect, who gives a shit about what you won in CGS back in 2006-7? That's 10 years ago now, and unfortunately you haven't achieved anything since. So who gives a shit? Not disrespecting the whole, you've won a big title back then, but it's the whole element of I don't give a shit, right? You should be winning something now.
Yeah.
You should be winning something in the last 6 to 9 months, or at least in the last year. You should be doing something good, and that's where people are getting themselves wrong. Is there are a lot of UK players who are saying, "Oh my god, I won such and such, 10 years ago," or "I won I-52 a few years ago." Who cares? Nobody cares about any UK event. You've got to go out there and you've got to prove yourself on the international or European stage at least, and do well. At least in some of the big leagues these days, and there are ways into those leagues somehow, as long as you keep putting in the work. And not a lot of these players realise that. Not only that, but I think especially in the UK, not a lot of players realize actually there's a brand aspect to all of this. So
Yeah,
organizations will pick up players based on their brand value or their marketable value. So if they can get a return on investment on those players through stickers or through any other sponsorship deals, because you've got a certain amount of players, then that they're looking at that aspect for a reason. It's all about return of investment.
yeah, for sure.
Someone's not going to say to you, "Oh yeah, I'm going to plow, £6,000 per month into this organization with this team and salary them at full whack," when you haven't done anything to help A, professionalize your brand,
Yeah.
or B, do anything on the European stage to actually show that you're good enough to play against some of the best teams in the world. They're not going to say, "Oh yeah, we're going to give out that money," because they're not getting a return investment. You can easily say any Tom, Dick and Harry can put in 100 hours per week and get onto a big stage if they're given the money to do so. But there is so few players who can actually achieve that really will do that. Okay, we've seen some good teams over the last year or 2 years come out of the blocks and do something. But at the end of the day, if you want to prove yourselves, you've got to start grinding for it. And you're not gonna get the salary if you can't build your own brand up. And I think that's where a lot of players don't realize they should be doing, is they should be streaming every day to how many viewers they can get and how many followers they can get. Make sure that they can get their Twitter out there, their Facebook out there, and they should be making themselves much more aware on the international stage, so that any sponsor and any organization, any investor goes, "Oh look, there's a profitable brand here," you know. And the other issue is in the UK, no one really knows where to go at this stage. Like I've had Valgar keeps on having conversations on the phone with me, and he keeps on going on about Rainbow Six Siege, for example, and he's like, no company really knows where to go currently in the UK with anything like this. So these are the future potential investors of our scene, and they don't know where to go. They don't know who's good and who's not. The Gfinity Elite Series may help build the profiles for some of these players, but at the end of the day, yeah, exactly, it could flop massively, and it's a big money problem for Gfinity. But at the end of the day, it could help build profiles for some of these players that just don't know how to.
I think one of first thing that I'll kind of touch on with that is that the same logic applies to everyone. So like even me and you combined, like where we're trying to get like permanent esports jobs that aren't players specifically, but other roles that are involved in it. And the same logic applies to that in terms of either way you have to put the grind into it in order to obtain said job in the first place. However, someone asked me to do it the other day in terms of like do a discussion about growing personal brands and things like that, right? And it's definitely something that I feel is needed. I think you can hear enough ask the vast majority of people that have kind of played under me with YouFrag in the past of how much I've tried to kind of put a bit of pressure on and tried to motivate people in order to do those sort of things, because at the end of the day, even from a slightly selfish point when I'm saying it, because then obviously it generates for the business at the time to help and grow that as well, but at the same point, for the players themselves, surely there's so much by it, especially in a scene where hardly any of it exists anyway. All it takes is for a couple of people to literally take the lead on this and grow it and do it themselves, and because of nobody else is doing it, they will be the people, or the first people within the UK scene to really do it and actually build themselves a brand. And yes, there's certain people in the scene that do have to an extent a little bit of a brand already. You look at people like Hat and Games and things like that, but they're still not people that are necessarily playing at the kind of higher levels of the scene, so to speak, right? And you're starting to see it a bit more now with people like Boaster, and I'll give full credit to Boaster. I've had a few conversations with him on it as well. In terms of like, at least with him, he's always like, I can't remember what LAN it was. It was like maybe about 4 I-series ago or something like that. And literally, I remember him there, and he's literally just going around with his fucking business cards, like, get your boasties, and just giving them out all the time. And I'm like, you know what? Fair play, lad. Genuinely good on you. And now he's doing it the same when he's doing these videos, but he's the only real sort of person to do it. And I get it, right? Again, it's another thing that you have to add to your day that takes up time, that takes up effort, and it is a very long-winded thing to do. But the way I look at it is, for all the time that you're sitting there putting in like anywhere between 4 and 10 hours per day putting into the game that you're trying to play and everything, why wouldn't you at this point spend an extra or take half an hour out and put an extra hour in, whatever it necessarily is, to just work on a bit of branding, whether it be making sure your Twitter profile active, whether it be creating a Facebook profile page, whether it be deciding to stream, whether it be YouTube videos, even Plays TV. People need to start like optimizing and utilizing it a bit more, in terms of it's such an easy thing to use that you can just get regular content out there for yourself, but people don't seem to utilize it in the correct way. And I will state that one of the reasons why I probably will do the personal brand side is because I love marketing in itself, and I'm like to an extent in the process of doing it myself as well, right, as we currently speak, of trying to build that brand up a bit more and things like that. But I don't think that, because there's no real guidelines on how to do it, then people just shy away from it, rather than kind of taking it as a challenge and thinking, you know what, I'm
Yeah,
going to do this and get the ball rolling with it.
I agree with you. The only reason why I kind of bring it up nowadays is because I read an article with Snoopy, who used to play League of Legends, obviously at a high level
EG,
for
Venture,
LCS,
yeah.
and he talked about, at the end of the day, his personal branding was what was letting him down at the time, before he sort of realized, actually, I need to spend time making myself look profitable for any organization, because he was finding out that other players in his team were exposing their contracts by being more profitable.
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, he was losing out on money that he potentially could be getting from that organization, because of how profitable his brand name was.
I think
And a lot
people,
of UK players do not realize that actually that's the power behind the throne, is if you can make yourself to be a profitable brand name, you will not get ditched by a certain organization. Just look at NIP. Look at the fact that they've still got Get Right, they've still got Forest, who are two very big profitable players right there. Yes, their form is pretty shit at the moment or whatever, but they're two very big profitable players that bring in the money from stickers or from signing sessions at events and everything like that. Even in Sweden, they're still very, very profitable. Same for Cloud9. Look at some of the big players in that Cloud9
so
lineup.
I was going to touch on the NA side of things, and the thing is it's not just the big teams in NA either. It's even the kind of semi-pro S teams that you see have a lot more of a following and a lot more of a content like media-based strategy than what you see from the UK. But I do personally think one of the big reasons behind that is, and you're seeing it more and more nowadays, in terms of we're now getting it less frequently where the guy that started the organization is still the guy that owns the organization, right? Especially with a lot
Yeah,
of these organizations now that are getting bought out by actual businessmen that are then going to run it, that are going to completely view things in an entirely different way, and compared to your average person that runs the organization, that lets people get away with blue murder, that kind of free rolls it to an extent and just lets things be, whilst when the business side of it comes into it, everything's a lot more efficient, everything's a lot more strategic in the way that it's approached. And I think that's probably partly to do with it as well, because I don't think like there's enough pressure from organizations on players to do these sort of things, whereas in America it's kind of compulsory. Like, you have to be doing it, otherwise you can go fuck yourself a lot of the time, right? And that over here doesn't exist. It's just, who can we get that's potentially going to win an IR series for me, and then we're done, right?
Yeah, I mean that's part of the problem right now. Is a lot of organisations take that quick buck for the short-term exposure that it gets them in winning a LAN. Whereas, like, look at M&M for example. You know, they pick up teams left, right, and centre just because they want the exposure, which is good. It gets them somewhere, like their Windows UK kind of thing. But at the end of the day, it doesn't contribute to the whole UK scene aspect. We need players to build that brand profile. We need an infrastructure which can help them understand, actually, you are losing yourself some money here by not making yourself profitable, or not even sitting down and thinking, actually, I need to do a bit of branding here, or work on my branding, or work on some aspect of themselves. Like when they consistently whine on Twitter or something, you're just sitting there thinking, investors are going to look at your Twitter. If you link that Twitter, they're going to look at that and they're going to think, actually, we don't want to be working with that guy because he's whining and he's calling people cunts.
Like, you can ask
why?
so many people. I've had to bitch about this in the past, and even I'll give a shout out to Adam XO just for the shits and giggles of it. But like, even with him, there was a couple of times in the past where I've been like, dude, you can't put that. Like, in no way, shape, or form can you put that. Because at the end of the day, for all the time that say, like, and people have to think this now, because at the end of the day, especially if you're playing under an organization and that organization is actively seeking sponsorships, right? Then they're sending these details of their teams, their players, things like that, their social followings, whatever it necessarily is. All it takes is that one dude that you've just sent the email through to check one of these player Twitter profiles, and you just go and scroll through it, and all you do is see this dude calling everyone else in the scene fucking autistic or whatever it necessarily is, right? And it's just kind of like, what sort of appearance are you actually setting for yourself? It's not just you, but it's like, as soon as they start doing it, then people are going to be like, well, why is that organization not stopping them from doing it? Why are they allowed to put these sort of things? They clearly can't control their players and what they're putting on social media and things like that. And recently I'd say it's actually got quite bad, but from what I've seen, like every single day there's some form of new Twitter drama. Like, in fairness, the one thing I would say, it is mostly through the amateur side of the scene, more so than the kind of semi-pro players that we now kind of class them as, shall we say. But although now and again they do get drawn into a bit of it as well, it is mostly the amateur players that are the ones that are like really, really bad with it. But at the same point, how the organizations at that point aren't literally being like, look, well, I guess I say how, but a lot of it is because of there is a lot of organizations out there. Then as soon as one team gets like dropped or leaves another team, then near enough there probably will be another organization that will pick them up, because they don't know any better. Because a lot of organizations do not put any form of research or whatever into the teams they pick up. They literally receive an email of a team blagging, pretending to be a lot better than what they are, and they pick them up through that, rather than actually looking into them remotely, seeing what they're about, seeing who they are and things like that. And you've seen that with the recent Uflux like pick up, in terms of I mean, not that I want to start going on flaming, because I like Josh, I really do, he's a nice guy, but at the same point, the way that like 3 out of 5 of those players, even before picking them up, are notoriously people that are not exactly the most positive people on social media, shall we say, let alone the hacking scandals, but that's a whole nother subject for another fucking day. But it still applies the same thing, right? And it's I think a lot needs to be done, but at the same point, the people that have the power to try and do it, whether it be the organizations, whether it be the tournament provider, like organizers and things like that, which again maybe we can touch on a bit when we hit onto the Epic side of things, that need to start doing more in order to make players think, look, you have to be doing this, rather than making it like it's an option. Because at the end of the day, as we move like more into the field of it's actually becoming their job to do something, or they're being paid to do something, you can't throw that argument out there anymore from the player's perspective that you know what I mean, it's a hobby, whatever it necessarily. If you're being paid to do it, treat it exactly like you would any other job. And that's the thing that probably triggers me the most at the moment, is that there's no fucking way in hell the way people act when they're playing CS and the way they represent organizations they would do for their average day job. Like, no way in hell.
Exactly. I don't even like my social media nowadays for my work, right? I don't even post anything about work.
Yeah, no,
nowadays, because I've been in the past, I cheekily put something up on Facebook saying I'm bored at work today. I was on my break at the time, but I got questioned. I got questioned over that, and I was just like, but I was on my break. So, but you're not allowed to put that on social media. Why?
The same logic
So
applies to like when I've worked in management roles and say like people coming and giving their CVs, right? Like the first thing that I will do no matter what is look for that dude on social media.
yeah,
Because I do it just because at the end of the day it gives you a bit more of an impression about who that person is, what they do, what they like.
it's probably why I can't get a job in esports right now, because my social media is shit.
Yeah, I probably need to clean up mine a little bit, but still.
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
it's
you're right.
still the same logic, right? In terms of that, the way that we're saying about the sponsorships, and it works the same way in terms of that. If I'm looking through it, I'll look for their social media, and if the first things that I see are derogatory or flaming towards certain people, whatever it necessarily is, then it's just going to be like, why am I going to spend time or my own time on this guy? Why am I going to spend my own money on this sort of person? And it's something that definitely needs to be improved, but I think it's difficult to say how we're going to do it necessarily.
I think a lot of the issue is down to the fact that people. There's a lot of like parallels in my life right now, but people just don't know where to look or where to turn to in terms of advice for kind of things like this, and what that they should be doing and shouldn't be doing at the same time. I think there's a lot of grey areas. There's not a lot of black and white. There's too many different rule sets in different leagues. There's too many, so much to keep up with that you just, as a player, you're kind of overwhelmed a bit about some of this shit. And I think this is where, hopefully, in the near future, I would expect the British Esports Association to actually get involved in and perhaps have workshops around this. I know from my conversations at epicLAN with Red Bull, for example, Red Bull were very, very interested about doing some kind of infrastructure sort of lessons with various teams. They want to sit down. They want to say, this is how you do your branding, this is how you do this. They want to actually have proper workshops, and I think this is where the British Esports Association should be looking at helping make the scene better by actually giving these sessions to sort of players and teams that are involved in the scene. If there was a way, instead of having that sort of, how I don't know how Gfinity has set themselves up, but I guess they've got some kind of workshops that are going on in the background with regards to player branding or media branding.
Yeah, from what I know, they've definitely had like the kind of social media guidance sort of thing, is the things you can and can't do and things like that. I'm not too sure.
But a lot of that is gone. But a lot of that will be Gfinity specific and not actually esports specific, which is where players sort of struggle with. You're right about how some players go around and they willy-nilly say, "Oh, you will autistic, see you next Tuesday," and whatnot, or you're a virgin and stuff like that. If they want to be truly taken as a professional, or truly taken as someone who can be representing a brand name, representing an organization at a top level, they need to cut that bullshit out. It's not going to help them in the long run. It's not going to help them in the short run. I mean, I don't like touching on the bans, but there are certain people who are banned from epicLAN right now who aren't helping themselves by being so heavily critical on social media. It doesn't make us think, oh, look, we should review his ban or his or her ban, and we should, unban that person, because all they're doing right now is they're literally taking the piss, and they're critically killing us, and it's not working out in their favor. It's not working out in our favor, but it's not working out in their favor. If they want to be unbanned from a certain event, then don't be so critical. I'm not saying you're right to have an opinion or express your opinion, but at the end of the day, don't be such a see you next Tuesday about it, and actually try and work with us, because we'd happily review everyone's bans after a certain period of time, and the less likely that you're going to be such a cunt about it.
I was seeing how long it was going to take till you actually said it.
The more likely you're going to get unbanned. Kin is certainly one of those people who is likely to get unbanned at some stage this month. Who knows? I can't really tell you about the sort of policy that we've got in place, but we are constantly reviewing those bans every month, and eventually we will sort of say, actually, you've served your notice, you've served your punishment, there you go. You're unbanned. Look at Danny Boy for an example. He went to LAN. He punched Wawa in the face. He was banned for several years.
Yeah,
He eventually
came
served
back,
his time. He made a case to me in TeamSpeak back in the day, and I said to John at Wimbar at epicLAN, I said, look, he's gone to many iSerious events now. He's not caused any trouble at those iSerious events. Let's have him back. And he eventually got unbanned. Obviously, he's not come back. Well, did he come back? I think he did. But he was unbanned because of it. And people don't realize, what they say on social media gets picked up. We're always looking on social media. We're always keeping an eye out. Every mention that we get is a talking point in our own sort of communication avenues, like Slack, for example. We talk about people who are banned, or players that have caused some drama, or the famous incidents from last LAN in terms of various e-girls who caused a bit of drama with underage drinking. That is stuff that we continually look on and think, actually, how do we sort of combat that? And so people need to realize that what they do say on social media does get picked up by people in various positions. It might not just be epicLAN, for example. It could be iSeries, although probably iSeries wouldn't care anyway. But there are investors. There are investors out there who look at what you're doing, and they will think, actually, this person isn't invested. They're not worthy of our investment right now. There are several football clubs right now who are looking for players and teams to sort of invest in.
Well, I mean, this is the
teams like Man City and Chelsea are both big football clubs right now who are currently looking at the UK scene for big investment. And these players need to be careful, it's quite simple.
But this is what I was saying in terms of how the NA scene, as an example, has developed to that point where it's now got kind of the suits are now running the day-to-day more so than your average Joe sort of thing. And I think that the problem is as soon as that comes in, if from my perspective and looking at it from an overview, if I was the UK players that are kind of in and around that scene at the moment, firstly, sort my fucking act out, and secondly, take the leap and try and get your personal brand growing. Because at the end of the day, once these investments do start coming in, anyone that does have that sort of personal brand that is, from an analytical standpoint, a lot better to pick up than a lot of other players, you're going to be high up on that fucking list for when it first comes around. Because of, again, especially for UK scene, and this is the same thing which I was saying to you in terms of finding information out on non-player related people is near enough fucking impossible because it just doesn't exist. So the first sort of things that they're going to see when they are doing their market research on it, and trust me, they will do extensive market research before they actually invest in it. You're going to be the people that are top of that list when it eventually comes around, because you're the ones that have that brand, you're the ones that have all those the social media tags in it whenever they search for something, and you're going to be the people that first come into it. But the flip side of it is that otherwise, these suits are going to come in. They're going to take over control of UK organisations at some point sooner rather than later, and their rule sets are going to be so stringent in comparison to what they're used to now, of the ways that you behave, the things that you have to do, the time you have to put in, etc., etc., etc. That, knowing the sort of egos that exist among UK players at the moment, that's going to cause a lot of friction, because they're going to be like, no, go fuck yourself, there's no way I'm doing that sort of stuff, and however it necessarily goes. And I really hope it doesn't get to that point, but at the same, who knows, from the way that everything and the information is presented at the moment, it would seem like that would be a big issue when it does come around. But we will kind of move on to another topic, but still leading in from, because I mean, you started touching on then from the kind of certain decision making aspects of what you do at Epic. So we'll kind of get into
the admin side of it.
Yeah, well, in terms of so I wanted to go into the admin side of it. I know you obviously used to do iSeries CS admin and things as well, and I want to touch on that.
Should we get onto that then? Right. So basically, I got involved with the admin side of life in 2005. Back then, I was doing Enemy Down's not hottest rival, but one of the big rivals back then was a sort of a website called CCSSL, and it was a big Counter-Strike website back then, and I got involved with admin and doing things there. And of course, that sort of spawned me into Pro HL and doing league stuff for them online. Eventually, I moved into the SGL for a little bit. And of course, I was making a name for myself back then before creative. Well, actually, no, I33, there was a big fuck up from multiplayer, basically.
Really? A fuck up from multiplayer?
I know, right? Who would have thought? Who would have thought? Yeah, so at the time, I33 was where there was some big European teams that came over, and it was with a turn up and play sort of scenario. So there was 100 plus teams that are sort of signed up for that I33, and the admin at the time decided that they would try out 16 groups of 3 teams, I think it was, or however many groups
Even
it was.
just saying it makes me cringe a little bit, but yeah.
It was groups of 3 basically, and one team got promoted through, I think,
Right.
and the whole of the community, was up in arms. Then after that point, this was after all the scenario with that. To put in the turn up and play teams which they forgot about into the elimination bracket, they had to kick out 2 of the teams that they'd put through the groups. Yeah, so 2 of the teams were sent packing and said, look, you can't play. So it caused an absolute, fiasco at that LAN. And I remember all the drama from that LAN. It was great fun. So much so that the admin basically left his desk for an entire day and did not come back. So at this point, I was casually playing a bit of 6v6 on CS Compound, just for a bit of fun banter. Yeah, with a bit of the mod versus Rasta guys back then. So it was Creative who went up to some of the guys that multiplayer and said, look, there's this guy, he does a lot of admin stuff, and you should ask him to do like a losers tournament. So I ended up organizing the losers tournament, which is to date still the highest amount of money that we've ever raised for a losers tournament. So it was a £25 per team put in, and I think we raised £1,500 plus, and the winners took home half of that, and second place took a bit, and third place took a bit. So we organised that, and it was a very successful losers tournament. And then that got the conversations rolling with multiplayer back then, to come on board with their admin team. So at I34, I came on board, and I said to him before I34, I was like, we should change the system. This was basically Creative and Rastaman who sort of talking me through some of their ideas for iSeries, and I was like, actually, that's a really good idea. So we introduced the sort of 3-tier tournament system, which back then it was used in Enemy Down, called in a competition called Fair Shake, and it was very successful in Enemy Down, and everyone loved it because all the different skill levels should end up in their right sort of tournament bracket, and then they would play, and so on. Obviously, we didn't get that in place for I34, but they did get it in place for I35, and that's how it's been ever since. Obviously, there's been minor changes to it, but there has been, it's been there since I35. Yeah. So I34 got me, properly on board with the multiplayer admin team, and then the rest was kind of history. I was there until the end of Counter-Strike Source with Beefcake and Fire, Damage and Arky. We were all part of that little admin team. My fondest memories of adminning actually came from I38, and it was there's a relevant video to all of this as well. But I38 was it was delay fiasco. Who would have thought UK LAN having a delays?
Yeah, I thought they would run perfectly on time.
I know, yeah. Right? I know. But I38, the Counter-Strike Source finals finished at 5 o'clock in the morning. So it was one of the longest overrunning delayed tournaments that we'd ever noticed. But that wasn't actually down to our fault, because the tournament itself ran to schedule. Most of our tournaments, me, Beefcake, and Fire, we all had a great synergy, so we'd all have sort of different areas that we would contribute towards. So it was actually the stage that overran, and then there was issues with the setup of the stage, and then eventually it finished at 5 o'clock in the morning. We were dead, but that was one of the best lands I've ever had, because I remember an epic drinking session with Darren from FM at the time. You know, he literally. There was a moment where I sort of turned my back on Darren, and Darren just sort of fell over in the tote bars that were around, and it was just hilarious. It was a great weekend of epic drinking, so much so that Wizzo, after the CS finals, opened up the bar to
I've been told about this. I think so.
me, Damage, Arky, Richard Lewis, Mick, from like Cadred back in the day, McGee, and Beefcake, and someone else. There was a group of us that were in that room, and we were just drinking for the rest of the morning, basically, until about 9 o'clock in the morning, when we couldn't just stand at all. It was a great morning of like storytelling from Richard Lewis, and there was some really good stories all around that final and everything. So that's one of my fondest memories, and one of my absolute favourite lands as well. Despite the fact that it finished at 5 o'clock in the morning, it was the fact that Wizzo just decided, you know what, you guys have earned your keep, so why not? Why not go into the tote bar at Newbury and just literally, lock yourselves in and have a few beers? So that's what we did. We had a few beers. We had a good drinking session, and then 9 o'clock rolls around. We're all fucking tired as hell, and then I end up going back up to my desk and thinking, I really want this weekend to be over. And I just collapsed on my laptop at the time. And then obviously a video appeared of me a few hours later of me snoring on my laptop. So
I've been there to an experience of Gumpster snoring, and it is like next level snoring, man. I will.
I snore like a cow.
Yeah, it is insane. So how would you say like adminning would you say it's changed a lot from kind of back doing events to what it is now? Like,
do you know what? No, it hasn't changed at all. Like, people don't realize how difficult and how thankless adminning really is. You're on 15-hour days, maybe even 16 hours, and maybe even more than that from what John Kelly's gone through over the years. But you're literally there from the tournament, before the tournament begins on a certain day, to the end of the tournament day. So that last match of the day, you've still got to be there. You can't fuck off and go. You have to be there just in case there are any problems with the servers, any problems with anything else. It is a very long, thankless task, and it's very difficult to cope with. A lot of people, they come in, they think they can do it, and they end up doing like shit because they can't cope with the demand that players put on you and things like that. And I've been there where we've had 200 people crowded around the admin desk, complaining about seedings, back in the day. And it was not the best of experiences, but you get the satisfaction at the end of a tournament thinking, actually, you know what, that was a good run tournament. It was, there was problems, but we overcame those problems. And when we were doing iSeries, it was me, Fire, Beefcake, and obviously Damage and Arky had helped out previously in previous events, but it ended up being us three together, and we were like the longest serving admin team there. And we often got the flack, we often got shit thrown at us, but we ran smooth events from start to finish. And problems that we would deal with, whether it be with the tournament platform like ClanForge back in the day, or anything like server problems, or we were always on the ball, we were always doing something, and we managed to get things done.
That being said, now you mentioned ClanForge has actually officially been retired now, isn't it? Because you can't even get onto any of the previous ones. I was trying to check for it the other day. I was like, damn it, because what were they meant to move it over to after ClanForge?
I don't know. It was. Let's have a look at the
forward. Yeah, because I mean, you can find it on Liquipedia now, which is alright. But like, CF event was the one.
Yeah, it was basically the one. I used to love going back back there for results. But yeah, I mean, ClanForge has been officially retired, obviously, and you know, some of us since then, since that they've officially retired it, we've often said actually we miss it.
Your camera's screwing me up. I keep having to change the overlay a little bit.
Yeah, so yeah, we do miss ClanForge, and it's atrocities that it would throw up, like the brackets breaking or killing, sitting in an office having to hack his own system because the coding is, you know, long and arduous. So, you know, some of us do miss the joys of ClanForge, but I'm so glad nowadays I don't have to deal with that at all at an iSeries event. You know, I have
moved on to bigger and better things, haven't you, Gumpster?
well, bigger and better maybe, but yeah. So obviously at the end of I-46, that was the final sort of event for me that I adminned, because it was the final Counter-Strike Source event, really, and I just decided, you know, Beefcake had already said I'm not going to be coming back because I've got a family to keep going, and you know, it's just long days and weekend is not worth it otherwise. And Fire was exactly the same, and so it was only going to be me, and I just decided, you know what, I really can't be bothered. It's about time someone else came through and came through the ranks and volunteered. So Messioso joined multiplayer by that stage, and then he brought on John Kelly and stuff like that. And you know, to this day, John's still with game and multiplayer and dealing with the bullshit that comes with it. So then I got an email shortly after I-48 or something, no, 47. I don't know. It was shortly after I-47. And it came from Mr. Winkle, John Winbar Winkle. And he was like, John, do you know what? We need a CSGO admin because you know, our admins have decided to leave, and you know, or whatever, they've decided to take on other roles. And I was like, actually, this sounds like a really good chance. And I took the chance. I thought, right, this will be my official retirement swan song kind of LAN event for adminning. And obviously I never got out of that because, you know, Mr. Winkle was like, do you know what? You can run events because you love delaying tournaments so much that we want the delays. We want the tournaments to run really as hectic as possible because that's what we love at epicLAN. And I enjoyed Epic 10 for everything. You know, I'd obviously gone to a lot of epicLAN events before that, and I hadn't been to a couple prior to Epic 10, but I'd enjoyed every epicLAN I'd gone to, and I knew the guys that were there. They were always quite friendly, always quite approachable, and everything like that. And then obviously the Epic 10 moved to Kettering Conference Centre, and it was just like, do you know what? I'll go there. And I went for the setup day before LAN and got on well with every member of staff there. I think I remember the first few words I said to Gary Sabu. I was like, you know, you're a cunt, mate. And we sort of kicked off, and you know, it was a Epic 10 was amazing, and I wouldn't swap it for the world. And then Epic 11, Kev came back, but I was still admin for Kev, and after that Epic 12, they decided to take on Esports Manager because they realized that it was quite a heavy task to run several tournaments at that point. So John was like, do you want to be our esports manager? I've already spoken to the rest of the management team. They really are keen for you to get on board. And I was like, do you know what? That sounds like a great, move into esports as a whole. epicLAN it's still quite small. It's still, an ability to do things with epicLAN as a whole and actually move into something I give a shit about. And epicLAN is a great competitor to iSeries. For a long time, iSeries has had the stranglehold on the UK, and that's a great thing. They're a business. I get that. They have their profits to look after, blah, blah, blah. And I'm not criticizing Multiplay in the slightest. At the end of the day, Multiplay will do what they need to do to keep themselves going and keep relevant and so on. But I saw epicLAN as a natural competitor. I saw epicLAN as, if it can expand, if it can do well, if it can continue to grow at the good rate it's growing, then we can do things with epicLAN that we couldn't do with iSeries, or I couldn't do with iSeries. So I got on board, and basically sort of, the rest is kind of history in that respect.
So, I mean, once you initially took that role then, because, I mean, we'll get onto other bits relating to Epic as well, because, I mean, as you just kind of touched on, even for me, when I go Epic, like, everyone is just pretty much friendly, from the staff to the volunteers to everyone that's there throughout. It's just an overall fun weekend, whether you go in there for the sake of going there or whether you go in there to actually play in the tournaments. But when you initially took on that Esports Manager role, what were the kind of responsibilities that you initially had? Like, what was it like? Essentially, what are the what's required in preparation to run an event like Epic for the esports side of it? I mean, I know we've had discussions on it a little bit, but yeah.
At the start, it wasn't as hectic as it is now.
Well, I imagine at this point, because, I mean, at the end of the day, Epic's grown considerably year on year, attendance analytically, so I guess every event more comes with it at this point, right?
To put it bluntly, John was a bit of a control freak back then, so a lot of the responsibilities were taken on by John anyway at the time. So, all I had to do was make sure that admins were there to actually oversee tournaments. Sure. So I conjured up a plan at the time, and I decided, right, I'm going to do this sort of action plan of what I would like Epic to do and produce from an esports side of it. So my plan of action was, we drive the talent through the ranks. We get people on board who are willing to admin, who are wanting to admin, and who are wanting to pursue their esports career. So that was my first step back then. My second step was looking at the casters and the commentators, because obviously at Epic 10 we had Quad V involved back then, because they still did sort of friendly favors for John and things like that. So you had people like Pansy and D-Man there who were there for Call of Duty, and so that kind of side of it was never sort of my role at that stage. And then obviously by Epic 12, we had ESL UK there who were doing Dota, so I didn't have to look after Dota at that event. I just had to look after everything else. So, at that point, it was kind of like, right, what do we do with all the casters that we bring on board? Wow, this is what I want to do. We should drive them. We should get them noticed by people, and we should do this, this, and this. Now, since then, my role has become ever so more difficult, because not only are we doing our own epicLAN events, we're also doing external events like EGX and ESL UK events as well. So that's some of the stuff that we do outside of Epic that people don't generally see, that are actually helping our business grow as a whole, because we make a little bit of money out of that by producing a contract towards people like EGX and ESL UK. So some of that now is, how do we formulate a plan with those kind of things? And then obviously, since we started selling out epicLAN events, I've had to do the seating plan. So that includes rejigging everyone's positions in the tournament.
Can you stop fucking that up, by the way? Because like every time, man, it's just you mess it up. People are unhappy. It's just not acceptable.
It's
seriously.
Unfortunately the nature of the.
Yeah,
the
it must be an absolute pain in the arse. In fairness,
it is a pain in the ass. The first LAN we sold out properly, and I was just like, I don't know what to do, so I just got a spreadsheet up. I just was like, here's every team that we've got. Yeah. Let's boom, 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 boom. And I formulated a plan from that. And then obviously since then, people have come to me with requests for their sort of seating, and the Dota players, they don't want to be sat next to well-known CS players. So I sort of cater it out as, right, I'll move certain CS players to certain areas of the hall. So you'll find that where there's the big fire exit gap now in Fair Isle, that I'll have some of the well-known players sat in that area, because obviously that's a great area for people just to stand there and spectate. So I don't do it for the shits and giggles. I do it literally with a planning process of how I formulate, what teams are going, and think who's going to be the most important teams there that I can, say, right, well, we'll keep them out of Dota 2 players' reach and stuff. Then you've got the StarCraft players, and they're all over the fucking place, and you've got Hearthstone players that are now coming to LAN.
Yeah.
The whole aspect of my sort of role and responsibility at epicLAN now has grown so much over the last few years, not just through the event itself and overseeing admins, it's overseeing casters, it's overseeing what content goes out on the streams. These are the big areas which, now we're sort of starting to think, actually, we really need to focus on these areas. So, Epic 22, I'm looking at perhaps getting someone involved to just being a team leader for the casters only. I don't really want to divide my time between admins and casters. I need someone else to sort of oversee those people. Yeah. So, I have that sort of
I'm available to hire, mate. Don't worry. I only charge like 10 grand a day, near enough. My ego's inflated a bit, but yeah, continue.
You tell people about epicLAN, you tell people about its cause and its values, and some people don't realize we don't make any money. Whatever money we do make from epicLAN events itself goes back into the LAN. So, for example, and maybe I shouldn't say this, but I will, but the sponsorship money that was used from the Dota 2 sponsor money, that money goes into the LAN event itself. So we are in the process of purchasing a new streaming PC for the Dota 2 stream, so that it frees up casters to just come to the event and just cast from a PC instead of bringing their own setup. Obviously, we've got the same for CSGO, and we still have JJ and Jay bringing all their sort of equipment with themselves.
Who's JJ? I've never heard of him before.
Well, he wasn't there last event. Neither were you, weren't you?
That is also true.
So, all of this stuff we look at and we think, well, where can we reinvest in? And there is a lot on our sort of list of wish list right now that we'd like to reinvest in. So we'd like to make the streams prettier. So where do we go from there? Do we get green screens? Do we get bigger banners? Or do we get, other things? So there is all this sort of investment that we want to do, but we don't have, because we're still not making enough money to cover all of that right now. So obviously that's in my role and responsibility to sort of think, oh, well, what do we need, and what kind of priorities do we have here to sort of say, all of that. So technically, prize money, even though it gets covered by sponsors, it still comes out of our door sales at the moment. So, for people who don't understand how that works, we say a certain amount of money comes from a sponsor. They pay for that sponsorship package. They get their name branded on everything, and then we take a cut of that sponsorship money and we use it to reinvest into the LAN. That's basically what happens. The prize money itself still comes from the door sales itself, and obviously, we do want to grow, so we still need. We still have our own operating costs. So we've got a head office at Stoke, which is basically it's a self-storage kind of contained kind of thing. One of those sort of garages. Yeah. That's basically what head office is.
How all good businesses start, though, mate.
Yeah, exactly. But it still costs money to rent that out every year. Those operational costs do not go away, and people don't realise that. So it's all about being sensible. And of course, next year we're hoping to expand into the sports hall. So we're hoping to go from 470 participants, which we've now taken up the entire venue bar the sports hall. We're hoping now to go into the sports hall, and that costs a lot more money than what we're currently renting out right now, because obviously it's by Kettering Conference Centre do it by per room hire and not by by sort of venue hire. It's just per room hire. So if you rent more rooms, you're going to cost a bit more, and so on and so on. And of course, their sports hall, if no one's really noticed when they've been at our events, it's always constantly used throughout the weekend. So last In June, there was obviously the table tennis championships that were going on in the sports hall. That's money lost to Kettering Conference Centre if we're using that at a similar rate to what we're using it right now. So they have to cover their own costs. So they're going to charge us more for it. I'm not going to obviously go into specific details, but you get the gist. Yeah. So any kind of money that we get is reinvested into the LAN, and people don't realize actually, we can't pay admins, we can't pay casters, we can't do this. We'd like to, I'd like to say to casters, at least at this moment in time, and eventually admins, here's your money that you're going to get for doing this LAN. I can't offer any more, but I would like to offer you that. And, we're all about that. But at the end of the day, we're all volunteers for epicLAN. None of us get paid for what we're doing. We're kind of a friendly community kind of aspect LAN. And we want to progress. We want to get bigger. It's just, again, the big problem we talked about earlier on in this video is actually the time work balance is there. So, for example, John's just this year he's dropped a day from his job, and he's now working longer hours on the other days of his job to actually focus on epicLAN solely on that day a week. So if, let's say, he takes out a Wednesday every week, he's solely focused on epicLAN's kind of responsibilities and all that kind of bullshit.
Yeah, but it's an extra 30 hours a month near enough that you can put into progress in Epic, right? I think you've mentioned it to me before, and I mean, to be fair, you're touching on it now in terms of like what are the next stages for Epic, and we've had conversations on it in the past in terms of obviously if it does actually move venue itself, because then it does open it a lot, because we are now at the point where I think everyone's noticing the improvements with Epic, like LAN by LAN, in terms of whether it be the streaming quality, whether it be the production, whether it be just the overall event and how it's working. But like, how else do you necessarily improve it? Because of, like you said, in terms of the attendance, like tickets are near enough being sold out every time, right? So you then get to that catch-22 of how do you, like, you do pretty much need to move to a bigger venue at some stage in order to take it to the next level. But as you touched on, financially, very, very difficult to do that.
Exactly. It is very, very difficult because obviously, let's say we moved to the sports hall with Kettering Conference Centre and we said, right, there's a capacity of 750 people. The biggest problem we have here is, are we going to sell 750 tickets, firstly? And are we going to be able to keep the atmosphere that we have from our current LAN? Yeah. So whilst I know and understand that the esports side, everyone loves, coming to LAN. They love shouting at people. They love standing up and, getting involved. And they love throwing pies in my face. There is the other side of epicLAN, which loves the sort of smaller feel to it, and they love the smaller, casual kind of let's have music blaring in the room kind of feel at the moment. And we won't be just renting out that sports hall. We have to then rent out Lakeside, which is the room downstairs where the casual community sits. So that again adds an extra cost. So you've then got another 100 tickets that is technically as a capacity, so that's 850 there. So again, you're looking at, well, are we going to sell 850? Then you've got the two clan rooms that are upstairs right now that constantly get sold out the day we open tickets. Even before we even open the tickets, they've sold out. These are the two clan rooms that people are now relying on every LAN. So that, how are they going to cope by being told one LAN, actually, you're not going to be in those two rooms because it's just not financially viable. Not only that, but you've then got to look at the infrastructure right now. We're still pressurizing Kettering Conference Centre. We're still saying to Kettering Conference Centre, you need to get that infrastructure in. You need to get the internet in, and we need to have a gig line if you really want to expand, because there is no way we're going to be able to fork out that kind of money for a gig line off our own backs just to make your venue look better.
Hey, it shouldn't be on you anyway.
Get you more money. Yeah. At the end of the day, we're still paying them to rent their venue. Yeah. Now, if their venue is not fit for purpose for what we're doing, then that's on them, and we can take our business elsewhere. Exactly. The biggest problem with that is then where do you find those venues? We've scoured the place. At the time when they were moving from Uttoxeter, epicLAN, to Kettering, they looked around every venue possible in the relative area and couldn't find anywhere that was suitable that had a natural sort of progressive expansion plan. Nowadays, you'd be looking at bigger venues as a whole. So there are other venues we're looking at constantly. There are other venues who really want us to go there themselves. You know, that we multiple times of Leicester City Football Club constantly emailed in, you know, and saying they want us to go to their venue and use it. And you're just like, well, is that suitable?
I mean, I guess it's going to get to a point where obviously these decisions are going to have to be made sooner rather than later. By the time every event goes by for Epic, then these decisions are coming to the kind of front and foremost of your thoughts, right?
Yeah, exactly. And it's kind of a crossroads right now because we're looking like, you know, especially now that multiplayer have dropped the winter LAN this year, we're looking like we're going to sell out this event. There's no two ways about that.
If you don't,
our October event will sell out. Because we're currently, I think it was 231 tickets remaining yesterday. We've sold more tickets at this stage than we have done at any of our previous October events. You know, we had our biggest October event last year, and that was something like 350 or something like that. You know, we're going to be looking at a sellout event this event, and you've got to think, you know what, we really do need to sort of take this conversation now. And that's where it goes. And obviously then the other issue that we're having is we're missing the boat with other esport titles. So this is something that me and Valgar are currently discussing right now because he's pressurizing me to sort of experiment with our esport titles. And I'm saying to him, well, I don't want to drop any titles right now because we get a guaranteed amount of tickets from every tournament we run. And Hearthstone is starting to pick up. Hearthstone's starting to pick up for our LAN because we've had the most amount of players that have come specifically for Hearthstone last event than we have done ever before. So, you know, all of these esport titles are growing for us personally.
I think it's very difficult to what other esport titles you'd really move into at this point because, I mean, I remember you touched on it a bit earlier in terms of like Rainbow Six and things like that, but at the same point, even if you were looking for it like the overall stats of the flagship esports games, then those ones that are the flagship ones are the ones that you pretty much are participating in anyway, besides League. But at the end of the day, you've been there with League, you've touched on League, and at the end of the day, the attendance wasn't good enough for League, and that's why it got dropped, right? So
yeah, I mean, there was a lot of circumstances around League of Legends. I'd love to see League of Legends come back to epicLAN. I think right now it's not feasible because of, you know, we're selling out events regardless of what titles we have. But I'd like to see League of Legends come back. You know, it was a big decision for us at the time to drop it because, you know, in the run up to Epic 15, we had one team signed up and one team sat on the seating planner at that time. And then it was not until the Wednesday night, the day before LAN, that we had a further 5 teams decide, oh, look, we want to come to LAN. Now, for us, that's not financially viable. We can't just say, look, we'll have, you know, we'll constantly put out this money for that tournament if we're constantly getting a lack of sign-ups in the run-up to the event. Because, you know, if we didn't get 5 teams sign up on the Wednesday night of LAN, we would have had to have cancelled that tournament. And that's not acceptable to the customers who have paid their money to come to LAN and to us either, because then we look like twats. You know, even though we have that stipulation in our rule sets and
but the way that the public perceive it would end up being that viewpoint. So
the public would perceive it badly. And of course, there isn't just that to consider. There is an element of, you know, we were at the time approaching Riot for Riot points, which helped alleviate, you know, or helped give more money towards players in Riot points. And of course, they need 2 weeks' notice for anything like that. And of course, we were like, well, we don't know what kind of teams we're going to get because we've only got one team signed up right now, you know, and there's not much social media activity. There was only Wawa at the time who was sort of begging people to come to epicLAN for League of Legends, and it was really bad. And then there was the mitigating circumstances around League of Legends. So at the time, there was only about 20 teams in the biggest competition at the time, which was ESL Premiership. 20 teams signing up for that, the biggest esport title in the world in the UK. Surely should be getting 60 to 70 plus teams every week, signing up for the qualification process. So there was that. Then there was the fact that there was a year-on-year decline in iSeries attendances for League of Legends as well. And that just tells me a whole picture of different things, that League of Legends in this country was flagging at the time. And me and John just sat there and we just went, we've got to drop it because it is financially going to be a burden for us going forward. So we dropped it. And of course, we got a lot of flack from the
That's
community.
where I was going to go with it, is in terms of like the kind of irony that comes with that and the flack that you receive from it and when it dropped. I remember it because, I mean, at that point I was like relatively up to date with all the ongoings of UK League at the time as well. And at the end of the day, I don't understand how people really have the right to then moan about it, because at the end of the day, like you said, it's a fairly simple thing to do, to sign up to a fucking tournament, right? Like, at the end of the day, if you can't do that and you can't show, it's the same as like if you're running what's to call it, so like a music gig, right, as the perfect example, and they've put the tickets up for sale. If they've only sold 2 tickets by the time that it's 1 day left to the event, like, fuck, they're actually going to go to that event, they're going to cancel it for sure, right? So the same logic is always going to apply to these sort of events as well. And I don't feel at the time, I mean, in fairness to League, now you see some of the sign-ups that happened across most tournaments, and the numbers are starting to increase again for League, which is great to see. Genuinely is. But at that period of time, it was a bit of a dark space for UK League of Legends. So for all the time that you're not getting the sign-ups across the board, like, as a business, you're going to literally look at it from the statistics and analytics given to you, and they were all shit for UK League of Legends across the board. So why are you going to keep supporting that? So it seemed a bit negligent from a lot of the people that were moaning about it. But in fairness to them, I'm guessing it was like, I think the thing that triggered me the most out of it was people that don't go to the event moaning about it, right? Because then it's like, well, how do you think you have the right to moan about it if you've never attended, or you're not signing up in the first place to go yourself? Then your point is irrelevant. But it's definitely something I fully agree with. But I think, like, knowing what you're like and knowing what Epic's like overall, then I assume it is going to be something that's kind of potentially always on the talking point list of what you can potentially do with it, if you can do something with it going forward at some point, right? But like you said, it's very difficult what and how you can do it.
We reintroduced League of Legends in some form or fashion last event, where Valgar was like, because he was like applying for a job for Riot, and he was like, this is what we should be doing, and shall we bring it back? So that's what I did. We brought it back as a fun tournament last event in 2v2, so that it wasn't 5v5 or something stupid where people just pay to come and get nothing really. So we had 2v2, and we got 7 2v2 teams sign up for the tournament, and it was a really fun tournament to have, and it was great to see League of Legends back at the event. But the problem is like with any tournament, with any kind of, we've always said to the communities that come to our events, we will happily support your game title for as long as we have to, as long as you keep coming back to the events, because otherwise it financially becomes just not feasible for us. And we've had, me and Valgar are doing this sort of dance right now, because he wants me to drop StarCraft 2 and he wants me to drop Dota. And I was just like, these are tickets that are guaranteed currently, because the StarCraft community haven't flagged. They're always going to guarantee us 20, maybe 30 tickets every LAN because of the amount of friends they bring. And then you've got Dota, where we had 10 or 11 teams sign up last event, and we had a brand new team that had never been to an epicLAN before sign up for that event. These are tickets that are being sold currently. Why should we drop those tournaments and risk losing those two communities for them not to come back to our events if our experiments, or if our risk taking doesn't work out? I could take a risk on for example, PUBG or Rainbow Six Siege, and say, look, here's, let's do an esports tournament on these two tournaments, or these two games, sorry. And we might not see any ticket sales at all.
I think
And I'll bring that up because COD, we sort of dipped our fingers in COD and we thought, right, well, we'll come back to COD. We'll do it on console because we'd heard about the Pro-Am LAN that had happened, and there was 60 odd teams that went to that LAN. We saw the opportunity. We thought, right, COD's big in the UK. It's big for UK players being good across the world. You know, consoles are big in general. We didn't see a single ticket sold. And of course, that's a risk for us because we have to buy those Xboxes for the community to come and play because they're not going to bring their own console. You know, they're not accustomed to that. They're accustomed for their consoles being provided at the event. So we had to have a.
Sorry, the only thing I was going to touch on there was like the issue is with, especially with StarCraft and Dota, is technically Epic's the only event that still runs tournaments for those two games. So by doing it, you would literally be killing off any form of like tournament LAN infrastructure for those games completely. It'd be out of existence, right? So it's such a bold move to make. But again, at the same point, like you're saying, and you've said it numerous times, it's risk versus reward, right? And a lot of the time, if you've got no statistical evidence to back up what the new venture that you might be going into would potentially work, it's not worth doing it realistically, is it? I think one of the other things that I wanted to start touching on, and we are going to have to move on to a few other points because otherwise this will be the 5-day episode as you predicted. There's so many. Oh man, it pisses me off every time I do one of these episodes with someone. There's so many talking points that we can get through, so I don't want to start cutting people off when it goes on to discussions, especially like epicLAN and kind of the way it's working. So I will kind of on the end note of that give a massive shout out to everyone at Epic because it is a great tournament. It is always a fun LAN to attend, and I mean, other than seeing Gumpster there, it's a great thing to go to.
Just as an add-on point, as this video should be viewed by about thousands of people, if anyone does go to epicLAN and has actual constructive feedback for us, please, for the love of God, don't give it to me. For the love of God, fill out the Survey Monkey forms in the aftermath of the events. We always monitor whatever feedback we get through the good, bad, ugly threads, for the Survey Monkey threads. You know, we get all that feedback. We look at all that feedback, and we always take on board what criticisms people have to try and make the event better. I know there are a lot of criticisms that people will have, and I know that people don't like airing it for whatever reason because they much prefer to moan about it. But if you want to catch me, if you want to talk to me about it, then please do. I know, you know, a lot of people have problems with epicLAN events, so please do get in touch and let me know, you know, what kind of feedback you want to give with epicLAN events. Obviously, we're all here to make the event better for people, and we're all here to sort of make it bigger as well. You know, eventually we'd like to see overclockers and come and do their little bit of delivering to desks and things like that. You know, all of those things we want to see go forward. So yeah, feedback is really appreciated.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with you. At the end of the day, when it comes to feedback, like, people need to start remembering that constructive feedback goes a lot further than what it does when you just decide to moan about something on social media, right? Like, when you do it that way, it's just not the right way of doing it. So the same applies to Epic and all tournaments that generally exist. If you think that there's an improvement that can be made, if it genuinely give the feedback as constructive as possible, and I can guarantee you most people that work within that tournament infrastructure will genuinely appreciate you for it and try and take it on board if they can. So definitely agree with you on that one. So we're gonna this is difficult. I've still got like 20 questions that we need to try and rattle through, so fuck this. I'm gonna try and do like 20 questions quick fire rounds, but it's gonna be right. So let's go. I'm trying to think. Right, so current thoughts on the effects of Gfinity Elite series. How do you
positive? I was a bit skeptical, very skeptical actually. I was very vocal in my thoughts, only because Gfinity don't like me. There's a story behind that somewhere. But yeah, basically, I think generally I'm positive about it. I think I'm disappointed in the fact that Gfinity sort of was like, you know, here's 4 UK teams that have joined the Elite series, and they then announced the MVU as the fifth team, and that was their sort of talking point, so that they could attract more organisations, more well-known organisations. And then they ended up not getting any more well-known organisations, so they just flogged another UK team, 3 more UK teams in there. And it's just like, actually, it started off really well. I think the production there is actually really, really good. I think it's positive for the UK, but I think they don't want it just to be about the UK. They talk the talk about being about UK esports and grassroots, but they don't really want that, because obviously from a money-making perspective, they need it to be global. They need it to be massive, and they're never going to get that. I did notice they put out an Australian version of it as well.
I was going to touch on that as well, actually, but for me, I mean, we had, I think in one of the, whether it be a Phoenix show or something that we done in the past, when we all had a bit of a rant about the Elite Series before it came out, mostly because of it was like, again, most of what I've seen from the Elite Series since it's been on has been positive. It genuinely has. It was just their kind of PR side of things before it took place, which was just absolute abysmal.
Nightmare.
Like, they seriously need to rethink their PR strategy, because it was just shocking. But at the same
point,
because
it didn't really,
it made no sense a lot of the time. They
made no sense.
Yeah, they don't.
It was the fact that they announced it, and then they would go really, really quiet, and then they announce something else, and then they go really, really quiet, and you're just like, well, announce something a little bit more about Gfinity Elite Series and actually give us some structure and some details around it, because that's what they didn't do in the early stages. They didn't give us any kind of idea on what it was going to be about. And okay, now since then it's working out positively. I don't see how it's going to make any money at this stage. Because I think the general sort of gist of it is that it's very UK focused. Obviously, they've got themselves on BBC Three. Not degrading what BBC are doing. I get what BBC are doing, and I'm really happy that BBC are involved, because I love the BBC. But if you're going to watch a stream, you're going to watch it on Twitch. You're not going to watch it on BBC Three. That's the problem. I think if it was going to have big sort of TV presence, they should have maybe put it on BBC Two, on a Friday night, Saturday night, Sunday night, and freed up some kind of schedule there on BBC Two, not just BBC Three, because they forget that, if you're watching it online, you're going to be watching it on Twitch. You're not going to be watching it on the BBC. So, that is something they should have thought about. Obviously, the BT Sport aspect, that's a great thing, great move as well.
I think you said to me, it was like on Twitter when I put something about that, and you put something similar in terms of like the value of the TV production sides of it, and how things are going to go. And being honest, this is probably one of the other things of why I then start making the comparisons to CGS a lot of the time, because of CGS, it was notable that everyone that kind of worked like the kind of top beards at CGS essentially walked around and strutted their stuff like they own fucking everything, which coincidentally seems to be a lot of the way that a lot of people involved with Gfinity seem to go around things as well, and just kind of thinking that they are the big cheese. And as much as I have respect for a lot of them and what they are doing is great, but there is a lot of arrogance behind the people at Gfinity, without a shadow of a doubt. And there's just so many things like that. And then we see like the kind of the importance of how they value the TV side of things. CGS done the exact same thing, the way they were going around broadcasting rights and things like that. And then just altogether in terms of the way that the inflation comes into it is the biggest thing that kind of threats me with this, in terms of, because the CGS fallout, once it fucked up, left the scene in shatters, right? Because at the end of the day, it then meant that so many people that then had this salary were then expecting it off of everyone else, and it's kind of the same boat. So it
inflates everyone's
don't get me wrong,
expectations of the scene.
I think that the problem is like realistically, in order to grow, someone's got to come in, and it will be inflated no matter what, right? Unless you're looking at doing it in an ever so slowly like type of way, it's gonna happen. But the problem is because there are so many things of the way that Gfinity are doing it with the Elite Series as to how CGS worked, then I think it's put a lot of people it's made them very cautious of how it's necessarily gonna go. But at the same point, again, we'll try and move on and get through some more questions. I might actually do this at some point, depending on how the rest of the Elite Series goes and kind of what comes out of the announcements after Season 1, and if they are definitely going to follow it up with the Season 2.
Well, I reckon they'll follow it up with Season 2, because it's quite clear that they're going to follow it up with Season 2 because of the way they've brought out the Australian series.
Yeah.
So I think it'll be there. I just don't see how they're going to make much money from it
Well,
at
I
this
don't think
stage.
I
I
don't see
think
how
we don't.
Gfinity make money in general by looking
Well,
at their
yeah,
accounts,
same.
but
I think at the end of the day, they should have worked on the infrastructure side of the UK scene. If they really want to help UK esports, which
yeah,
quite clearly they don't properly, they just want to make money, which is fair enough. But if they want to help UK esports, someone needs to step in and give it some infrastructure, give it what it needs, give people an opportunity to see the united rule sets, give people the opportunity to actually have some branding to them name, give them workshops on how to be professional within the scene and how to act professionally within esports. You know, all of that infrastructure is still missing at this moment in time. You know, you're not going to get the best players in the world from the UK right now because of the way we currently set up our UK sports. You know, don't get me wrong, not every other country has that sort of infrastructure in place. I get that, but at the end of the day, we need it here in this country because of the way we're sort of set about with everything else. You know, you've got Sunday grassroots sort of football for, you know, the football, and you've got all those sports that have their own infrastructure in place. So there's coaching, there's, you know, coaching of players and how to play tennis, for example. There's tennis courts for free, there's tennis courts that are, you know, paid to play, etc., etc. Bowls Club has more fucking organization than we do in esports right now, and that's where we're going wrong.
I mean, don't get me wrong, it's quite commonly known in terms of like the overall lack of regulations and things that are in esports overall, like in comparison to what is everywhere else. And I do think that will start coming with time, but at the same point, the problem is like you are touching on, is it kind of falls on the likes of Gfinity, the British Esports Association now, which I'm still a bit disappointed in from the way that they've done things so far. I was kind of expecting a bit more of how involved they were actually going to be, but we'll see what happens.
I think they're involved. I think
they're
they're
still
just
relatively fresh, yeah. I think, but I don't personally think that being in the background as much as they are at the moment is going to be is what's needed. Like I respect what they're doing, and if they were doing it on top of everything else, then I'd be like, yeah, fair enough. But if that's their primary way of doing things, then I don't think it's really going to reap that much rewards for many people overall.
Yeah.
But again, it's fresh. There's still a long way to go with them. They're still working out a lot of kinks and things that they need to do and improve on. So hopefully it does eventually go that way.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, like I admire what Gfinity are trying to do right now, and I admire, you know, Paul and that lot in Gfinity, but their background issues are what's irked me in the past. You know, they oh, well, I really can't go into some of the stuff that they've said, but there was a debate between two certain organisations which came from Gfinity about what's classed as a spectator, and you're just like, that is the most meaningless debate to ever have, to ever even erupt, and you're just like, fucking hell, just get a grip. A spectator is a spectator. It doesn't matter if they're sitting down in a chair waiting for someone else. They're there watching whatever's going on. It's a spectator. So how TV viewership is literally viewed as right now. Barbs sit there and they extrapolate everything that's given to them in terms of raw data, and then they make an estimate on how many people are watching. Now that person could have been leaving that channel on for all of 10 minutes and watched that program, but it's still counted in the peak viewership. You know, it doesn't matter how spectators are counted, and that's my biggest problem with certain aspects of Gfinity, is they irk me about certain things like that. You know, and then they berate you for work that you put in. And the fact that I have a full-time job and can't commit to every single thing in the world, they call you lazy. Yeah, nice one. So sorry,
Just a
that's
little rant,
little dig there.
No, it's cool,
nice.
mate, it's cool. So we're gonna have to try and wrap it up fairly soon. So the last few things that I want to kind of go through quickly. And what we might do, by the way, for this is that I guess, I mean, we're constantly talking anyway about certain little like content bits that we can do. So I mean, we might even start doing like a part 2 of these sort of like meet the scenes at some point soon, when there's a lot of stuff that we haven't necessarily covered. So we'll potentially look into doing that at some point in the future as well. One thing that I was going to say, I'm going to go through like a quick checklist. So quality of events since you first got into esports and kind of where it is now, on a scale of 1 to 10, how much do you think they've improved, if they have?
UK or world?
UK.
UK, I think the quality of events have stayed roughly the same. I think, quality of LAN events have stayed roughly the same. Quality of actual events have got better over time. I think ESL Premiership is a big example of that. How that they've grown their sort of infrastructure themselves. They've got production going on that's amazing. Their stages are fucking insane. Peter is incredibly proud of what he's achieved with ESL UK, and I think that's a great thing. And same with James. I think a lot of that is a credit to what ESL UK have pulled off. They've even had, they've even helped host ESL Europe kind of events here. So Pro League finals and Pro League stuff have been hosted in Leicester, and some of their casting and setup. So I think some of the esport events have definitely got better as time has progressed. I think Gfinity's Elite Series is obviously a nice step up as well. I think it means that both ESL Premiership and UK Masters now going forward have to raise their game to match that somewhat. But yeah, UK events in general have got better as time have gone on. It was nice to have the Pro League finals here a few years ago. I'd like to see a big event come to the UK, like an IEM. Would be nice to come to the UK, or ECS is a great example.
ECS is great.
Yeah, I forget about ECS, but ECS has happened twice now. They really want to move venues. They want to incorporate something else, like a football stadium, for example. They really want to do that, according to them. So this is the kind of thing I'd like to see, big events come here to the UK, because you're not going to get the exposure from an epicLAN or an iSeries. You're going to get the exposure from those big events that land in this country, that will help elevate that sort of profile of esports. I think I watched a seminar with Odie and Tosbot back at a university. I think it was Loughborough University or something like that. They did sort of an esports session, weekend, whatever, there, and they sort of did some questions and answers. And Tosbot was talking about, there needs to be more events in the UK that sit in the sort of inner city part of London, because that is where your investors, your sponsorships, and your big partnerships will come from, is from the inner city of London. So
the overall, I mean, even now, to me, I still bump into so many UK players that are kind of into gaming and whatnot and into esports, but they don't realise that the UK has some form of esports structure there as well. They only know about what it's like on the international level, and I think that by having more frequently these bigger tournaments and whatnot come over, especially if there is a way that we can kind of get the UK teams included, and we look at the previous Gfinities, and we look at the whole easy skin scenarios in the past of how they still managed to qualify, or even Gfinity 3, that being said, where you had Infused and FM that managed to go there because there was specific UK qualifiers for it as well, and things like that, which can then just slowly get that the scene boosted and make more people recognize what it is, because at the end of the day, by doing that, there's still a big scene or a big market of people to be untapped in the UK, which would significantly help it from an analytics point of view going forward, right? There's still a lot more that needs to be done from that, so I agree. But we'll move on to the two final questions, essentially.
I was going to say, you need to wrap this up quickly.
I know. I've got work soon, dude. I've got a bolt. But what's the one thing that triggers you most about the scene? I know this is a difficult one, because you've got to narrow it down to one.
Oh God, seedings. It's the one thing that triggers me the most.
Okay,
is seedings, and how people have this sort of misconception around seedings, and that they should be based on basically nothing apart from names in a team.
Oh yeah, no.
Seedings are by definition based on a ranking system that you have in place, which, like for tennis tournaments, will be based on ATP rankings and where your world ranking sits. For example, things like Wimbledon will use your year ago sort of grass results, and then they'll use the 2 year ago kind of 75% of, or sort of 75% will be added to your points. So it's why certain players get elevated because of their grass court results. So the seedings are based primarily on a ranking system that helps you know who is in the right form at the right time, and it is based on a prediction of where you should, in theory, finish. It's not where you're expected to finish, it's where in theory you should finish because of your ranking.
The problem is, though, at the end of the day, especially when it comes to UK seedings, is that roster swaps happen way too frequently to actually make it a proper way of doing it and a balanced way of doing it, because at the end of the day, three out of 5 players have left that team, then near enough their achievement shouldn't count of what it was before, because of 3/5 of their team have left. Moving on past that is that because of there's so many different tournaments and only certain teams are qualified for certain tournaments and certain other teams are qualified like for others, and people still vary their rosters up when they're doing it that way as well. Like, there's no clear-cut way of having a point system to rank it. Like, I tried working on like something behind the scenes for a little bit to try and put something together, but it's so fucking difficult. And in order to maintain it as well, so it actually remains as, like, you know what I mean, as prominent as possible, it's absolutely insane to try and do. And I think eventually we will get there, but for all the time that the scene's still very amateur in many ways, it's very hard to kind of get a correct way of doing seedings properly. Like, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying there's not better ways than what currently exist, but a lot of the time it is people expecting to be higher in the placements because of you know what I mean, they might have had, I think you kind of touched on it in the first, because of someone's won an I series 2 years ago sort of thing, they still think that keeps them at the top of the scene now, and it's like, well, no, it fucking doesn't. If you're shit now, then that doesn't mean anything. All right, last question then. What is the biggest positive for you about the scene?
I think the positive mark coming in right now is actually the investment in the scene that is sort of dangling there. It's not come into the scene yet, but there is. It is gradually getting there. There is, 3 top level leagues now in the UK: Gfinity, Elite Series, UK Masters, and ESL Premiership.
UK
you have
tours. You forgot. Oh shit.
Oh shit. Oh dear. Yeah. And then Ben Bag. What a ledge. Yeah. And then
fucking up your camera. You
sorry. Yeah. So I need to get back onto Skype now. Fuck's sake. Yeah. So. Yeah, I think the investment is there in the scene, and it's gradually getting there. Would I like a job in esports? Yes, please.
Get
me a fucking job in esports. Whoever's out there watching this. But yeah, there are various different football clubs right now looking at the UK scene specifically. They're all doing their market research around UK scene, so players should be sort of wary of that and should recognise the fact that there is a lot of people looking at the scene right now, and they really want to get involved. They just don't know where to start to get involved. They don't know how to get involved, and that's the problem. And I think that's the biggest issue going forward is actually we don't have much coverage of UK teams in general for each of the esports. UK CS:GO does its sort of best to cover the scene, which is few and far between, because
it's debatable.
Yeah, it's only me, Duck, and Blanks who ever write stuff, or when he wants to talk about cheaters. So there's only a few of us who are actually participating in UK CS:GO stuff. So if anything, more people should get involved.
Yep.
Want to get involved in UK CS:GO? Fucking ask.
I'm working on a 1 or 2 behind the scene things for it.
Yeah, so there is a big problem with content within the scene, so that will help. If there is more infrastructure there, if there is more investment somewhere, then maybe people will actually get involved with all of this bullshit. So yeah, I think the investment side of it is exciting going forward. I think epicLAN is going to be exciting going forward for next year. Our early plans for next year are looking exciting right now. So, there's a lot to be excited about. It's just, it's taking longer than expected. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, no, that's fair enough. I do completely agree. I think that to an extent, certain people, including myself, probably thought certain things were gonna come into the scene kind of quicker than what it has, and it's still dragging out on a bit. But at the same point, I
It
still
is,
think
but
there's loads of things that as a scene we need to improve on before we can kind of expect those things to just fall on our doorstep in the first place, right? So it definitely works both ways in terms of if we're wanting that investment, then there's still a lot more things that everyone involved in the scene needs to kind of give themselves a kick up the arse on in order to actually achieve it.
yeah.
But either way, Gumpster, good sir, we will wrap it up there. Thank you very
Well,
much for coming on. It
it's
has
been a
definitely been
2 hour,
an interesting
20
one.
minute.
Yeah, I mean, as we said, I think it's definitely been a Gump storytelling mode, but it's definitely really interesting to see and hear for sure in terms of how you've necessarily
You're not going to go slit your wrists now, are you? I don't want it. I've bored
maybe
you to
we'll
death
see.
with my old age of being
I
around
did yawn
this.
like 500
Oh
times.
yeah,
That's
of
right.
course, yeah.
Um,
Okay.
but no, seriously, thank you very much for coming on. It is genuinely really good to see. I hope people will actually tune in and listen and actually take it under like in their own thoughts of half the stuff that you've came out with. Bear in mind it is opinion based, so don't start hating on people for the pure sake of it.
Very
Um,
nice,
but
Elliot.
other than
Thanks.
if you
Thanks for
as
that,
your
mate.
camera froze,
Yeah.
like I'm pretty sure you're
Good job,
like
mate.
I've just got that one bit
He's
on your.
lagged. See ya. Oh,
Oh,
hello.
there we go. Like it was the most retarded face as well. I've just got that stuck on the video. That's hilarious.
Hello.
Um,
30-second delay. Woo.
yeah, true
Yeah.
that. Either way, we'll wrap it up there. So thank you very much for watching. Remember to like, comment, subscribe, hate, whatever it is you feel like doing. Genuinely do appreciate it. So if you would like to see more, by all means, give me suggestions of who you'd like to see. We have got about another 5 meet the scenes coming up very soon. So keep an eye out. Other than that, peace.